Hello, I'm Sarah and welcome to my YouTube channel. In this video, I'm going to be showing you everything I made in 2024. I made 18 things, all knitted. I guess I have a few sewing things, but I'm not going to have them in this video. I'm really looking forward to showing you all of my finished objects, and I've also really been enjoying watching everyone else's videos about all the stuff they made in 2024. So I'm excited to participate. I think I made one of these videos a couple of years ago, but I haven't been doing it every year. So I'd love to start again, and I think this is going to be really fun. So I made 18 things in 2024. 5 were pairs of socks, and I also made 6 jumpers. I made 1 cuddly toy, 2 hats, 1 scarf, and I think that's everything. I think that brings us up to the total. I'm just popping in after having recorded the whole video, as it's a very long one, to let you know that there are timestamps for the sections where I talk about different types of things that I've been making. So socks, other accessories, and then garments, and then to tell you that at the end of the video I talk about my knitting plans for this year, 2025. So please feel free to skip around if that's what you are most interested in doing. I'll start out with the socks. I don't have all of them to show you now. I split my time between Philadelphia, which is where I am currently, and Edinburgh in Scotland, which is where I'm from. And so a couple of the things that I made this year are in Edinburgh. So I'll just let you know if I don't have something when I'm talking about it. I'll pop in some pictures, so you'll get to see everything. I'm not totally sure how well the colors are going to come through on the camera. Today has a bit of a weird light because it's snowing. So I'll try and make it work, but you never really know. And the snow is so beautiful. We only have a few inches of it, and I don't think we're getting any more, but it's been really nice all morning to watch the snow fall and, bundle up. So here's the first thing I finished in this year. They are the Rising Dawn socks by Stephen West. In 2022, I attempted Stephen West's Year of Socks, and I made a couple of videos sort of vlogging the process of knitting those. I didn't finish. I think I did 6 or 7, and these were the last ones that I did. I didn't finish them until the start of this year. I guess it's 2023. Not 2022, 2023 Year of Socks. But then he did it again this year, which I didn't participate in. I just found that even though I really like Stephen West, I found that a lot of the sock patterns did not hold up super well as wearable socks. A lot of them had, I guess, like quite bulky cable and garter motifs, and he used the same heel flap on every pair of socks, which was a garter heel flap. I did that on my first pair, and it just was really stretchy and baggy. So after that first pair, I just started doing either some sort of slip stitch heel flap. So in this pair, which is a slip stitch stitch pattern, I just continued the slip stitch pattern onto the heel flap, and then I did my usual heel turn and knit away at these. These took quite a long time because it's slip stitch, but they came out really nicely. They've gotten a little bit of wear, but not a huge amount. And I made them using Woolly Mammoth Fibers Natural Sock. And it was, I don't know if she does repeatable colorways. I don't love this color. It's sort of a urine yellow with a couple of red flecks, which would be worrying if you had those in your urine. But I really enjoy the texture of the yarn, and I really like how warm they make my feet feel. So I bought this as a sock set. It came with 2 minis, and I've used both of those minis in other projects for other things. And I think that this works, being like all one color sock as a pattern. So that is the first finished object. I'd started these like in 2023, somewhere in the middle of the year, and it took me quite a long time to finish them. But now that they're done, they're very nice. This was one of the first projects I finished this year. And yeah, it was a good pair of socks. Heel flap and gusset is my favorite sort of heel situation. I like knitting it, and I find it fits really well, and it like wears well. I like the way that it shrinks up, because I guess just the direction of the stitches as they felt suits my feet quite well. And I normally use a 64 stitch cast on. And this is my perfect leg length, which it's not quite shorty sock, but it's not that long. And my go-to sock and everything cast on is the Slipknot cast on. So if you haven't tried that out and you're looking for a really stretchy cast on that totally springs back, try it out. It's really good. So this has no nylon in it, and I have found that they do wear quite fast, but it's just like a really luxurious walking experience and so warm and cozy. So I do think that this is a really good natural sock yarn if you keep that, what I've just said, in mind. My next pair of socks that I made, I did in March. I had surgery at the very end of February, and I was home with my parents, and I took it upon myself to start knitting through my 52 weeks of socks from Lina Magazine book. I've made a handful of patterns from it. They've been really great, and it's such a beautiful object, the book itself, so I've been really enjoying knitting through it. I don't know if I'll knit all the patterns. It's kind of a challenge that I'm intrigued by, but I think I've knit almost 10 at this point, and I'm having a great time. So yeah, I made the Lottie socks. I think that I originally saw these on 100 Acre Wool. What's her name? It's on the tip of my tongue. Isabella, that's her name, on her podcast, but maybe like a year ago. They have these sort of varsity stripes at the top, and then it's this lace pattern down the front of each of the feet, and I really liked that. I'll pop a picture up of mine. I'm not sure if I got a good picture or not, but either way, I'll also have had a picture of the pattern on the screen so you could see what it looks like. I used Whistlebear sock yarn, which is a really interesting yarn. It's 80% mohair and 20% some other sort of wool. There's no nylon in it, and it's quite tightly spun, but the mohair is, instead of being fuzzy initially, it's like very sleek. And it makes for a really, really strong yarn. It's very difficult to break with your hands. It's quite hard wearing, and it's thicker than a fingering weight. It's probably about a sport weight. I knit the Lottie socks using my regular sock needle, which is a 2.25 millimeter, and I ended up with a very dense fabric that I found quite difficult to knit. The yarn, since it's these long fibers, it really doesn't like to be bent into the stitch shape, so I found it to be quite splitty, and if I dropped a stitch it would like pull down a couple of rows. So I found that quite difficult. The next pair of socks I used the same yarn, but I went up a needle size and it got a lot better from there. But for the Lottie socks, they took me quite a while, and I probably wouldn't knit with that same yarn at that gauge again. I have one more skein of it, and I'll probably use a 3mm or a 3.25 for it. But I liked the pattern, and these socks I've worn quite a bit because I knit them at the beginning of when I had surgery, and then I was home for about 6 weeks total. So I had a good like 2 weeks just to wear them around the house. And then it sort of got hot, and then I came back to the States. So I haven't worn them that much since then, but they're really good, and I was back home in December and I wore them a little bit and I really enjoyed it. So I can't really speak to how the Whistlebare sock yarn wears yet. Like, it feels quite hardy, but I'm not sure if it actually is because I haven't really like gone out and about wearing them. But I'll let you know when I do that. My next pair of socks, sock pair number 3, the Lucerna socks, are a similar story, and I knit these in about 2 days. I'll try and put a picture on the screen if I have a picture of my version. There will definitely be pictures of the pattern. These are also in Edinburgh. So for this pair I did go up the needle size, and it's a really beautiful sock pattern. They're so dainty and cute, and I just think everyone should make these socks. They're really wonderful. It's mostly utilizing the purl side of the fabric as the right side, and then you make these little, they call them sort of rice stalks in the pattern, I think, where you make, it's like a combination of knits and purls to make these, like, they look like icicles in mine because my yarn is sort of a cream color. This was a really interesting project for me because I was using double pointed needles, which is a needle type that I really like. I exclusively use double pointed needles for knitting in the round for a couple of years, and I've switched to magic loop primarily in the past few years, but I do really like DPNs, and I never have any issues with laddering except for these socks. I think I just have a lot of practice knitting the just regular stockinette, and not a lot of practice knitting reverse stockinette. So I ended up with some ladders, which I was able to work out, like just by rubbing the fabric a little bit and wearing it. But it was a really fun sock to knit. Really enjoyed it. Would totally recommend. And the yarn at the bigger gauge was much, much nicer. This is a similar situation to the other pair of socks, the Lottie socks, where I haven't worn them that much, just because I left them in Edinburgh, but I look forward to wearing them a lot. The other thing I'll say is that this sock had an interesting cast on, and I don't think I quite nailed it. I would try it again in a more regular sort of yarn texture, but I would say if you want to make them and you're intimidated by the cast on, just do a different cast on. There's no ribbing at the top of those. It's moss stitch, so they're quite like loose and slouchy and just really beautiful. I love that sock pattern. It was a great knit. I will definitely be making more pairs of socks, probably from the same pattern this year. I got this mug for free I bought something from Poshmark, and sometimes when you buy stuff from Poshmark, the people will just send you stuff. So I got sent this mug in the package. I think I bought like a pair of pajama shorts or something, and I would never buy it, but it's been a really good mug, and I think it's kind of funny. I've got a cinnamon tea in there. It's very good. Okay, the start of this video is going to be a little bit monotonous, but I should have some timestamps down below. So my third pair of socks I have with me, and they are the Erica socks, also from a line of 52 Weeks of Socks. So that makes 3 pairs of socks from this book that I made at the beginning of the year. I'm putting them on the sock blockers, but I'll offset it a little bit so that you can see the beautiful lace more clearly. Here's the first one. So they have this really beautiful sort of winding leaf vine on a pearl sort of panel with another smaller little vining cable on each side. I use the same cast on, which is the slip stitch cast on. It's my favorite cast on. And this yarn is really beautiful. It's Forbidden Forest sock is the colorway, sock yarn from Sugar Plum Circus, which I think is based in the Northwest. It's an indie dyer. I bought this yarn when I was at my boyfriend's brother's wedding in 2021. It was at this really cute little yarn shop in Seattle. Not that little. A very cute, very well stocked yarn shop where I bought a ton of stuff. And I have now used everything that I bought there. And this is one of the last skeins. I love the color. It's such a beautiful, really deep forest green. They're a little bit fuzzy on the bottom because I wore these recently and I haven't washed them, but I wore them like over tights in shoes, which is normally how I like to wear my hand knit socks. I find that they just keep my feet really warm with the tights. I did an I've Partridge heel flap, although I'm not the best. It's been a little bit compressed, so it might be hard to see. I'm not always the best at keeping track of which one has been knit and which one has been slipped in the I've Partridge, so it's not perfect. And then I did 2 stitches of garter, or maybe it's just, yeah, it's garter on each edge of the heel flap to pick up from. I think I saw this in a video from, maybe it was Earth Tones Girl? From someone, or maybe it was Knitting Traditions, I'm not sure. But I really like the way that that looks when it's a solid sort of, I mean this is slightly variegated, but mostly solid sock. They're really beautiful. I had so many issues knitting these. Not with the pattern, just with me. I think my tension changed significantly from the first one to the second one. So I knit the first one and it fit really well. And then I knit the second one exactly the same and it was way too small. So I had to unravel the second one and re-knit it. But then it was like a whole half leaf longer than the other one to get it to be the same length in real life. Which was so strange, but it doesn't really matter if one of them has an extra leaf than the other because they're in my shoes and also no one's counting. These are very beautiful. They're holding up great. I mean, you can see I wore them recently. The slip stitch heel is getting kind of compressed as favored socks heels tend to do, but like the ribbing is doing really well, and I love the lace pattern. I think it's really nice when socks have a little bit of lace on them. Just a little bit of interest stops it from getting too boring when you're knitting with it. And yeah, I would make this pattern again too, but I would somehow make my tension beat more even so I didn't have to keep ripping out the toe and redoing it. I guess that's also the thing. I should probably not Kitchener the toe until I've tried it on, even if I've already made one and it's turned out well. I should probably like save myself the cutting by just doing that one little try on before I sew them up. So I guess that's my lesson learned. I made these in April or May. I think I finished these in April. I knit a lot of socks in the first half of the year and none in the second half of the year. I've got one more pair to show you. And these are the Ruffle Socks by Petite Knit. I'll put them on the blockers. I knit most of these on an airplane. I had a really nice summer. I went to 4 weddings, and some of them, 3 of them were in different countries. Well, I guess they were all in different countries. One was in Italy, one was in Scotland, one was in Greece, and then one was in the USA. And I knit these on the airplane, like various airplanes during that period of time. I've made the Midnight Dancer socks by Sari Norland, and I really love those. I love the ruffle. I like a ruffly sock, and I wanted to see what the petite knit ruffle sock version was all about. I made, I think, just the one change, which was to rib the inside of the cuff. It's sort of a folded over cuff. And I thought, in the original pattern it's not ribbed, but I thought it might like help it stay up a bit more. I don't think me doing that made much of a difference, actually. And yeah, it's quite a fiddly start, but it's the same with the other ruffle socks I've made too, because you have to cast on like 4 times the amount of stitches or something. I think I would maybe have an extra row in the ruffle next time. I probably won't make these exactly the same again. I just don't really like the folded over cuff. I don't think it adds much for me, and I generally want my cuff to be stretchier than this is. But I would make these again, except I would just pick up stitches and then knit the ruffle instead of doing it the way it's done in the pattern. I guess I would just knit a regular sock with a ribbed top and then pick up stitches and knit a ruffle if I was going to make another ruffled sock, instead of the sort of more complicated method. Although I don't think this is a bad way of doing it at all. These have a short row heel. I just followed what was in the pattern. My short row heel it's got a little bit, it's a little holy, but when it's on the foot you don't really notice that. And these are really nice. I used hedgehog fibers, ferrum, I think it's called. Hedgehog fibers ferrum. It's this sort of quite variegated, almost stripy olive green that is kind of dark in some places. This is a very pretty color. I used it for my extravaganza shawl? No, shawlography, which I made in 2021, I think. And I've used all my leftovers from that shawl as socks, and I've made some beautiful socks. So this was the last one from that batch, and they're really good. I've worn them a couple times. They look good as new. Washed them. They're a little, yeah, they're just like a little less stretchy around the cuff, which is sort of fine, but I find the deeper, more stretchy cuffs more comfortable. So yeah, they're good. I mean, all the socks that I've made this year are not really showing any wear, which is nice. It means that I don't have to mend any of them that soon. But I have, worn a decent amount of hand knit socks this year, so I like that. It's pretty nice. I don't remember if this sock yarn has nylon in it. I think it probably does, and it's superwash as well. So those are all of the socks that I made this year. One of my major projects at the beginning of the year was a scarf, and I cast this on Christmas Day of 2023. It was a really nice day. 2 of my friends came over and we all were sort of crafting of our own volition in this room, and we just had a really nice time all together. And I knew that I really wanted to knit a scarf. Scarves are a little bit intimidating. I've been knitting for a long time, but I've never made a scarf, and it's just a lot of kind of monotonous work, and it's just never been very appealing to me. But I wear scarves every day in the winter. I believe that if you're not keeping your neck warm and it's cold outside, what are you doing? That's what you need to keep warm. And I just thought it's time. Like, I like a cowl. A cowl is very nice, but I love the drama of a scarf. I really like all of the different ways you can use a scarf. And I have a lot of stash. So I knew that I had a couple of colors where I didn't have enough to make a garment, but I have like 2 or 3 skeins of like a sport rate or a DK. So it could be made into something pretty substantial. I also recently read Her Body and Other Parties by Carmen Maria Machado. I guess not that recently, but it's one of those that stays with you. And she has a wonderful retelling of the ghost story, The Girl with the Green Ribbon. So I was inspired to make a green ribbon scarf that I could tie around my neck, and that is what I did. So I used moss stitch and this like brilliant hunter green yarn. It's from Hedgehog Fibers. It is their sporty single base, which I don't think they make anymore. It's like really nice and drapey, single ply. I kind of promised myself that I wouldn't make any more single ply garments because I've made one and it was fingering weight and it took me a very long time and it just pilled immediately, and it's kind of, well, it's not really wearable, not for the pilling reason, but it's just such a delicate yarn that it doesn't really make sense to me to make it into a garment. But I had bought like a fair amount of single ply yarn, so I thought it would be great to make a scarf, and I did a three stitch I-cord on each end. I started these like ribbon ends separately, and then I joined them together and I Kitchenered the I-cord where they join. And yeah, I used all of my yarn. It's a very long scarf. It's extremely dramatic. I can, if I only want to loop it around just like once, if it's not too cold out, I can loop it around once and it's ankle length. And I like to wear it outside of my coat. And it's just like, I love it. I think it's gorgeous. And if it's colder outside, then I can do more of a wrapping around situation. Like so. And then I still have like a decent length of scarf to work with. This is about 900 meters of yarn. It took me 3 months to knit, knitting a good amount of it every day. It was very slow going. I think I used 3.25 millimeter needles. And the moss, I chose moss because I wanted it to be a flat fabric that wouldn't curl. And I didn't want to do double knitting because I thought I would have just enough yarn to make a very long scarf. And this was my best idea. So it worked out really well, but it was pretty labor intensive. I really like how everything turned out. I think I ended up increasing on one side of the triangle every 8th row or maybe every 10th row. I think it was every 8th row. I did a swatch trying a couple different versions and settled on that. I ended up with one of my skeins being from a different dye lot, and I didn't realize that it was from a different dye lot, so I didn't really anticipate needing to sort of stripe it in. Oh, here. You'll probably be able to see the color change much more clearly than you can see it in person. But unfortunately, the one that is of the different dye lot I put in the middle because I just didn't even realize that they were visibly different. But for the second half, like the second switch, I striped it in. I don't know if you can see that at all. It's not something that I ever notice when I'm wearing it. And this is getting a little bit fuzzy, but that's okay. It's a scarf. It's just so beautiful. I love having it. I really want to make another scarf. And I would use the same yarn. I would do the same thing. I love this thing. I think if you think that you might want to make a scarf, you should just cast one on. And it's okay if it takes a long time. I wouldn't cast one on like in the middle of winter expecting to finish it to wear that year. But I finished this in March, and I wore it a little bit in March, and then this year I've just been wearing it like every day. And it's beautiful. I love it. So yeah, that's my big success. Green ribbon scarf. It also makes me feel like spooky and fun when I wear it because of the inspiration. But I don't think it's costumey. I don't know if anyone would like see it and think of what I think of. But isn't that the point of art? Like as makers, we know what goes into it, and very few other people notice or care. So yeah. This year I made 2 hats. Both of them were from the same pattern, which is the Iris pattern by Sari Norland. It's an 1x1 rib, top down. It's like a DK weight-ish pattern, but I find it to be quite adaptable. I think it's written for fingering plus mohair, but neither of the ones that I've made have been fingering and mohair. The first one is this pink one. I knit this in the summer. It was one of the things that I took around with me on my travels, and I'm getting emails. I used Pearl Soho Line Weight, which is a yarn that I've used quite a lot at this point. I've made 2 jumpers. One of them was a baby jumper. One of them was an adult-sized jumper. With it, and I was planning on making a 3rd jumper with it, but what I recently talked about was this desire to not make single ply garments anymore, and line weight is single ply. So I decided I would turn this neon pink into a hat. I had been planning to make it into an intarsia jumper, but that was an idea that I had in like 2019, and time passes. There's a lot of ideas. You don't get to make everything you want to make. And I thought it would be a really great hat. So I held it double, and I think I used 3mm needles for this. It's got a provisional cast on, at least I did a provisional cast on. And then it just sort of is this spiral, 6-pointed spiral crown. And then I just knit until I thought I would have no yarn left. And then I did a tubular bind off. And I think it's great. It looks very sleek and professional. A lot of people in my life who don't knit and who aren't like artsy, how should I say this? A lot of people who I know who would be embarrassed to wear something handmade really like this hat because they think it looks store-bought. I love wearing things that look handmade because I make things, but it is kind of nice to be able to make something that looks very like trim and proper and professional. I think it's to do with the gauge and to do with how uniform it ended up being. So yeah, I think I might have added an extra 2 increases to the pattern. I have quite a small head. I think I just felt like making it a little bit bigger. I've been wearing this a lot. It's really gorgeous and warm. I love this yarn. It's getting a teeny bit fuzzy, as you can see, but I just think it's really nice. And there's not much else to say. It's a great hat. I would totally do this again. It was pretty monotonous and boring, but I found that it worked up not that slowly. It was like a fair knit. It didn't like drag on and on and on. And yeah, I really recommend this pattern if you're looking for just a plain ribbed pattern. I think it would be quite easy to modify to other weights and sizes. I would just say, if you're changing the number of stitches or the gauge, maybe when you're a couple of inches past the crown increases, just put it on some waste yarn and try it on so that you don't end up knitting a whole hat that's the wrong size, and you're good to go. It's very simple. It's like one page, the pattern, and it's really good. So yeah, I think I said the Iris hat by Sari Norland. My second hat was also an Iris hat. I don't have it here to show you because it was a gift. I made it for my boyfriend's brother and sister-in-law's daughter, who's 1.5 years old. We spent some time with them this summer at one of the weddings that we were at, and the baby, Margaret, is so cute and she loves blueberries. So I used a skein of yarn that was blue, and I made her a little blueberry hat. It's the same pattern. It's like I held the yarn double. I'll pop a picture of me wearing it in, and I also added a little stalk and leaf at the top so that she would look like a blueberry when she wears it. It's really cute. I want to make a lot of these, so I'll probably make her another one this year and maybe pick a different fruit. I might do strawberry and then like duplicate stitch in the seeds. I think that would be fun. And yeah, so I sent it to them and she loves it, and what a thrill. It's really great to knit a hat for a baby. So that was definitely a success. I just eyeballed how many stitches to use. I found that to be doable, and I knit this thing in like a day and a half. So it was very fast and easy to do. The next thing that I'll tell you about that I made this year is my one cuddly toy, and oh my goodness, this was a hit. I made Hazel the squirrel. She's from the Cynthia Valet Moosh and Friends book, and this book is amazing. Cynthia is amazing. I don't know why I cast on this squirrel, but my like early knitting background is in making stuffed animals. I learned to knit so that I could make myself more cuddly toys, because I was one of those children. I didn't like dolls. I was obsessed with stuffed animals. And I had this beginner knitting book where it had a pattern for a lamb, and I just kept churning them out to the point where like I didn't do the ears or the eyes. I just like churned out this endless stream of featureless quadrupeds and then played with them and cuddled them. And I still have that fire, I guess, except much more involved toy making. So here's the pattern. There's Hazel. I'll pop in some pictures as well of the knitting process. I used just some scraps. I used whole super soft on a 2.25 millimeter needle, and I think I used other scraps of Holst for all of the different colors. It's a very thorough and well-written pattern. The designer, Cynthia, makes it really, really straightforward. She doesn't leave a lot of guesswork, which is nice. For example, like she'll say where to put a stitch marker to place the eyes in if you're using clicky eyes, or I just embroidered them on, so you don't have to like figure out where to put the eyes in. I think you could, but if that's something that's a bit intimidating, then you don't have to worry about that. And like all of the instructions are very meticulous. It's really written for magic loop, she has how many stitches to be on the front needle versus the back needle. So it would be another step of pattern interpretation to make these with DPNs. I just used magic loop and it was so like very easy to follow the pattern. They're not easy patterns, they're very involved, but there's no sort of wiggle room. Everything's really well explained. And I just loved it. It was amazing. The head, that was fiddly. The very beginning was the hardest part, but then after that it's like you knit for an hour and then you have an arm, and then you knit for another hour and you have another arm, and then you knit for 90 minutes and you have the body. It's like Frankenstein and the joy of creation. Very satisfying, and oh my goodness, so cute. Here's a picture of her face. Mine is equally, if not even more cute than the one in the pattern. The only thing I'll say that is negative is that the outfit is extremely involved. It's almost more involved than a garment I would make for myself that's human-sized. And for some reason, all of the color work is done through mosaic knitting. I actually think that you could make the exact same result using stranded color work, and it would just take half the time. If you can see this dress, you can see that it's sort of checkered. And next time I make something from this book, which is going to be very soon, I think I'm going to cast something on in the next day or two, I'll probably just sort of freestyle the clothes a little bit. But oh my goodness, I love this. I love Hazel. My parents have a gallery, and while I was home, was it this summer? I think it was this summer. They were doing a little exhibition with a friend of theirs who's an artist, a watercolor artist. She does, she mostly illustrates children's books, but she also sells these really cool, beautiful paintings. And it happened to be about red squirrels. So they asked if my Hazel would like to be in the exhibition, and I thought they'd just like have her at the front door, you know, greeting people. But they put her in a case and had like a little plaque that said Hazel the Squirrel, made by Sarah. And she got so many compliments. Everybody loved her. It was really fun. And a lot of people want one, but they take kind of a long time to make. It's sort of a special gift. So, but it's nice to know that I have within my power the ability to make something that everyone who sees her wants. I really enjoyed all of the compliments that I got about Hazel the Squirrel. And I think that my yarn choice was great. Not for a baby. I would probably not give a toy made out of yarn that couldn't go in the washing machine to a baby. I wouldn't want someone to put whole super soft in their mouth. But I would probably make more things from this book using superwash yarn or acrylic yarn. Especially now that I've tried one out and it was such a rip-roaring success. So yeah, highly recommend. I think I want to make the sheep next. I really like all of them. The raccoon is so cute. I think that she has a couple individual patterns for sale, and I can't imagine them not being just as good. Oh my god, the raccoon has like fingers. Oh no, someone has fingers. That just seems very intense. To knit tiny fingers. Alright, it's time to tell you about the garments. The first garment that I made this year is this Yani pullover by Orlan Souk or Tetbesh Designs. It's made using Aran weight yarn, I think like 5.5 millimeter or 6 millimeter needles. And I used Whistlebear Cheviot Marsh in their Aran base. It was a gift from my parents, and I striped these two colors. And I think the light blue is called Longitude, and then The dark blue is like something about the sea. Wide sea, something like that. It's a contiguous sort of saddle shouldery design that goes into these quite puffy sleeves, and then the body looks short, but it's actually not cropped. It's actually just got a very deep yoke, and it's got a lot of positive ease. And I was drawn to this pattern because I thought it looked kind of sweatshirty in a way that I liked. So I'll just put it on to show you. It's got some short rows in the front, and it's got a fairly good length. I really like this fabric. It didn't really sort of mesh together and start to really feel like a fabric until it had been washed a few times. The Cheviot Marsh, not only was it quite dusty because I had it for a while on my shelf, but it's also quite crunchy. So it took a little bit of time to convince it to stay in this shape, I guess. I've worn this so much. I really like the contrast between the desaturated navy and the quite bright, like, sky blue. I think that they look really nice together. I chose to do 2-row stripes because I find that 1-row stripes can be a little bit finicky, especially when switching, and I think it shows very clearly if you have any changes in tension. Generally my tension is pretty even, but I didn't want to put it on display that much, and the 2-row stripes I just think are really nice. I love stripes. I made one other stripey thing this year, and I've got like a lot of ideas for stripey things. I think that the stripes really highlight the beautiful shoulder seam, and this is where the stripes change. Oops, I knocked an earring out. The stripes change along this contiguous seam, but it's sort of hidden in there because just of the way that the garment is put together, and I love that. I did make a really big mistake when I was making this, and I got the raglan increase rate wrong for like a whole big section quite near the bottom of the end of the raglan shaping. So I ended up I ended up like laddering back up in each of the 4 sections and rebuilding it with different increases, with the idea that if I can't do it, I'll just rip out. But it was like, that was like a week of knitting that I would have had to rip out. To be fair, each raglan seam took me over 2 hours to fix. So that was like an 8-hour fix, including the one where I had changed colors, which I did first. But I ended up doing it, and it worked out really well. You'd never know that each of these seams went back unpicked and then sort of rebuilt back up. The only drawback to this jumper is that I can't really wear it in coats because the yoke is so deep. So my armpit's here. So when I wear coats, it looks like this. So that's a drawback, but it's a lovely jumper. I really like the yarn. I'd totally say if you've been eyeing up the Whistlebear yarn, go for it. And yeah, I really like the pattern as well. I would make this pattern again, but just stop the raglan much earlier. I think it would still fit nicely. I ended up, I don't know how this happened, but each of my sleeves had something like 30 too few stitches, and you know, they're already big enough. So I didn't end up having to do anything to remedy that. I have no idea where that happened, but it actually worked out in my favor, I think. What else did I do? I decreased at the end of the sleeves just because I didn't want to have a cuff that was so big. Thought it might get in the way. I really like the detail of having a couple rows of stockinette after the ribbing. It's something I've seen in a couple patterns since this one. I don't know who started it, but I think it's very nice looking, and it really gives like a kind of rustic feel to the neckline. So yeah, this was a huge success. I love it. I had to buy an extra skein of the dark blue because I thought that I was going to run out, but actually what had happened was that my cat had battered it under the sofa. And then I found that the day that the skein that I ordered arrived. Yeah, that was the first garment of the year, and it was a big success. The second garment I made this year was the Vacation Vest by Park Williams. I don't have it with me, it's currently in Edinburgh. I used Knitting for Olive Pure Silk held double. I think it was on like 4 or 4.5 millimeter needles, quite thick needles. I ended up doing tassel-y things for the ties, and this wasn't that much of a hit for me. I wore it a couple times over the summer and I never really liked wearing it. The fabric felt kind of spongy, and it was like always gaping at the front, even though I had a couple of inches of ease. I guess just because the fabric doesn't have any elasticity, it wasn't like coming together, but it just didn't look very nice. I might sort of sew the front up so that the tassels are just cosmetic and give it another try this summer. See if I get more wear out of it, but it didn't take me very long to knit, and it was sort of a trendy item, so it's not that big of a loss, but I might end up unraveling it and using the yarn for something else if I can't get it to work for me by the end of this summer. The next garment I made is also not a huge success, unfortunately. It's a test knit by Gudrun Johnson, who's a designer whose work I really like. She posted that there was a secret test, and I thought it would be one of her beautiful colorwork patterns, so I was very excited to sign up. And it's this very nice sort of cardigan. It's inside out. It's a very nice sort of close-fitting cardigan. I think she recommended like -1 to 2 inches, -1 to +2 inches of ease. So not oversized. It wasn't recommended to be oversized. So I made a swatch, and measured it, and I made this, I think I made a jumper with 1 inch of negative ease. It's knit with Jameson and Smith 4-ply and a mohair silk fingering weight held together. I used Rowan Kid Silk mohair, and I made it in this royal purple color. The design features of the cardigan are, it has these reverse stockinette panels at the front that you can see, and then it's got a garter button band, and it's got this, I guess like saddle shoulder back. But my problem is that it gapes in the back. And it was really unfortunate. I finished the pattern, I took loads of pictures, I blocked it. I didn't leave the ends in, but I did block it. And I emailed the designer, and she just sent back like, oh, try blocking it, no one else has had this problem. But I can see in the other pictures of people who've made this design that other people do have this problem. And in fact, even in the designer's pictures, I can see that there's a little bit of rippling in the top of the back, which is like very pronounced on mine, but isn't so pronounced in any of the others that I've seen. But it is there. So without giving too much of the paid pattern away, if you look at this back piece of fabric and calculate the gauge and the number of stitches, it makes sense that this top section, there's too much fabric here for the amount of fabric there is going sideways, because stitches aren't the same width as they are height. A stitch, I mean, it's generally about 2 to 3. So for every 2 stitches wide, that distance is 3 rows. generally, like in stockinette. That's why a lot of the button bands you see picking up, it says pick up 2 out of every 3 rows for the button band. And for this, it was you decrease 1 every 2 rows for this section. So obviously, like, that those gauges don't match up to have a fabric that is the same width. So mine is like really baggy at the top, and it's not like an easy fix. I'm quite disappointed with it, and I was quite disappointed that when I gave the feedback as a tester to the designer, she sort of brushed it off. I just don't really think that it would work. I think that the only way to get this sort of back to really work is to either like block the hell out of the bottom section below the saddle part of the upper back, which is only going to work until you next wash the piece, or to knit them as 2 separate pieces and then seam them together, which I think is what I'm going to end up doing eventually to fix this cardigan. But it is a big disappointment because I'm going to have to rip out the button band and basically the entire yoke, because the back is done as you're knitting the yoke. But you can see here, I haven't added buttons because I know I'm going to have to take out the button band. But I have this little safety pin. You can see that it fits me nicely. And I'll pop in the footage. You'll have seen the footage of me trying it on. So yeah, it's a really beautiful color. I like the idea of the pattern, but I can't say that it worked for me. You know, if I show you the back even just now while I'm sitting here, that's what it looks like. I don't know if you can see. And at the end of the day, I've made, I mean, just this year, I've made 4 really beautiful garments that I'm not gonna wear one that has a big gap at the back. So it's a shame. I will fix it. It's just gonna be a kind of involved fix, and I haven't felt like doing it. So that's an unfortunate kind of fail. And I really like Gudrun Johnson's work. But I am a little bit disappointed because I just feel like this is kind of an obvious issue. And if you just look at the gauge that is in the pattern, it's obvious that the pattern isn't going to work. I like a bottom-up construction. It keeps me interested. And I really like joining everything. So yeah, I don't like to give a bad review, but unfortunately, in this case I am giving a bad review. This one wins the prize for being the most work out of anything that I've made this year. This is a design by Andrea Mowry. It was her 2023 Rhinebeck design, and I cast it on when it was released in the summer of 2023 using Stash. I used Brooklyn Tweed Shelter in the color Bird Book, which is this really nice green tweedy yarn, and the tweed is yellow, red, and like a bright green. With it, I used a Jamieson and Smith yarn, which is like this dark brown, but it's like one of those browns that has like a bunch of colors in it. It's very beautiful. And then I used this, it's actually like a cream light yellow mohair, which I got from Swoon Fibers, who has an Etsy shop. The Brooklyn Tweed Shelter, I think, is actually a worsted weight. I'd started my second ever jumper using this yarn, and then I like ran out of steam and learned a little bit more about construction and decided I didn't want to make that jumper in the end. So this has been in my stash for a really long time, and it was very exciting to start using it. And I really love my color combination. It's like a beautiful, very drapey fabric. And last year, when I was knitting it, I got to maybe halfway through the body, and then I stopped. And it just sort of sat around, and it was on my mind, but it was not really on the needles. I took it off, and it was on waste yarn. And when I picked it back up again, I had learnt a lot more. The past couple of years I've really just learnt so much about garment construction and what I like and what I don't like. And I knew that I didn't want to make the jumper the way that it was made in the pattern. The pattern has you knit the body in almost like a t-shirt shape. You add like some arm. You cast on a little bit for the top of the arm to give a really pronounced drop shoulder, and I just didn't think that I would like that. I think it's very nice on others, but it's not a shape that I really want to see on myself, and I just wasn't going to do it. I don't have a lot of experience knitting drop shoulder, although in the past 2 years I have made quite a few. I hadn't made any until last year. But since last year, I think I've made 4 now. So I decided that I would use the shaping from a jumper pattern that I love, which is my stick season jumper, and I would apply it to this pattern. It proved a little bit more complicated than I had anticipated because this has a really odd gauge. There's so many slip stitches that it just is mosaic knitting. It's not like stockinette or even color work. In any given round, you are very rarely knitting every stitch. Well, I guess 2 out of 3 rounds you're knitting every stitch, but most of the time you're not. So it makes a kind of complicated and weird, like it's hard to do shaping if you're not knitting every stitch, because there's a lot of rows where the stitch that you would be using to decrease or increase is just not being knitted. So you're really limited about when you can decrease and what rate. And for the first sleeve, I did not do a great job in figuring out how to do that gracefully. I knit the body and then I realized that I needed to modify. So I thought I'll just knit the sleeves, and while I'm knitting the sleeves, I will remind myself about the stitch pattern. I will figure out how to increase in pattern because in the original pattern you're knitting the sleeves top down, and yeah, and I'll make a plan. So that was what I did. It took me a really long time to knit the sleeves, and I finished the second one and I thought that it was going to be too small, but I just blocked it quite aggressively and it ended up being fine. I couldn't even tell you which sleeve is the smaller sleeve at this point. And I decided that I would use this shaping from the Stick Season sweater by Creabea, because did I already say this? I made it last year and I really like the way it fits me. Part of that included some shaping at the top of the sleeve. Yeah, so I just went about it and did my best. And luckily, since it was bottom up, all of the most complicated parts were at the very end. So I'll show you the back. I had a little bit of a practice run on the front, because then you switch to knitting flat with the drop shoulder. So with the armhole decreases, there's a hair. Had a little bit of practice with the decrease. I ended up doing the back. I did the front first because I was worried, because I only had 1 ball of this mohair and I was worried I was going to run out, and I thought if I'm going to run out, I want to run out on the back, not on the front. And so yeah, so I did the front first. It turned out really well. I incorporated the decrease into one of the darker slip stitch rows, which does hide any of the mistakes that I made. And then the back, I ended up incorporating the decreases onto the mohair rows because I felt a bit more confident and I wanted to highlight that shape. I think I 3-needle did the 3-needle bind off at the back to join the front and the back. And then I sewed in the arms, and all that left to do was the collar, which it did take me a couple of tries. This is the Brooklyn Tweed Shelter. It's sort of a felted yarn, so it doesn't have any elasticity to it really, and it really sort of wisps apart. So it's not really the sort of yarn where ribbing has stretch to it. So I went down to like I think I knit this on a 4mm or 3.5mm, and I think I went down to a 3mm for the ribbing, and then I decreased the purls, so it was 2 knit to 2 purls, and then it was 2 knit to 1 purl, and then I decreased to 2.25mm needles, and then I bound off. So it's like an artificial, it kind of looks like it's elastic, but that's all just knit into the shape of it. And then I did my regular bind off, which is just turning it inside out, going down a needle size, and then doing a regular bind off. And I think it came out really good. It's a very drapey jumper. I don't always like the way it looks with everything, but I think it's a very successful project. I'm very happy with it. I really like the modifications that I made. It definitely wasn't easy, and it was very time intensive. It's amazing to me that so many people have made this, because I almost didn't get through it. It was so tough. And people made like multiple versions of them. Yeah, it took me over a year. I'm very happy with it. I think if you're having an issue with a pattern, it's nice to make it in pieces because it's less to rip out if something goes wrong. So luckily for me, I don't really think anything did go wrong. And it turned out well against the odds. I enjoyed making this. I would make another pattern by Andrea Mowry. I didn't really end up using most of the pattern, so it would be nice to do something where I'm actually following what she's telling me to do, other than just the stitch pattern. So that's my tessellated pullover. The next project I finished I don't have here because it's a gift that I've already given. And it's my Nutidin version of the sort of waves jumper. The design of the waves jumper is by Spectacle Strick, and I used all of the numbers and shaping from the Doppio sweater by Sung-hee Knits. I made this one using 4mm needles, Nutidin held double, held with a strand of lace weight alpaca, which I got from Easier. And I used 2 colors in that. I think one of them is Thyme and the other one is Peacock. A light green and then like a peacock blue, like a kind of teal, dark teal. I have some mixed feelings about Nutidin. On the one hand, I love the colors and I love the way that the unspun yarn just blends together. I feel like so creative and like my vision is really coming to life when I work with it. And I used to have like a huge palette of colors of yarn that I could use to make really exactly what was in my mind. And I've really enjoyed making those sorts of projects with it, and this was one of them. The background color I think was it was a light green, I think Grod. A lot of the names are in Swedish, but it's from, all of it is from 2023 and 2022. And then the color shifts of the waves were the color Val, which is like a true blue, the color Skostra, which is a forest green, and the color Botaniska, which is like a pond scum teal, like a really muted peacock. And so for the actual wiggles, I shifted between those 3. and I used quite a tight gauge for this project. I originally started it for myself, but as I was making it, I knew that it was just so warm, I would never be able to wear it anywhere. I run quite warm, even in the coldest weather. I knew that that would be too hot for me. So I decided to pivot and make it as a gift for my dad. I have two dads. This one, Bill, is extremely knitworthy. I've made him quite a lot of stuff and he just wears it all. If he doesn't leave on a train, he's wearing holes into it. And so I knew that he would really enjoy a handmade jumper, and he loves to wear fun things. So I thought this was perfect, and they're kind of his colors. And he's always like playing golf or running around, and I thought he would need a really warm jumper like this. So I decided that I would make it for him. So the whole time I was knitting it, I was having him try it on and saying like, well, it's not for you, but how much longer would you want it if it was for you? And he definitely saw through that, but it was, we both sort of kept up the farce that he didn't know it was for him. And I ended up doing corrugated ribbing at the neck and at the bottom of the body, which just came out really nice. I love corrugated ribbing. And then I was knitting the sleeves, and it was taking forever, and I realized I was going to run out of the light green yarn. So what I ended up doing was decreasing the light green sections at the end of the sleeves as a way of bringing in the sleeve. And then I knit the cuff of the sleeve in the Botanisca color, purely because that was the only one that I had left at that point. It does look quite deliberate. I wasn't so sure when I was knitting it, and it's so hard to tell, even for weeks afterwards, I find. But I finished this in the summer, and my dad's birthday is in December, so I ended up keeping it and giving it to him in December. So I had it for months just sitting there, and when I brought it back out to give it to him as a present, I was like, oh, this is great. It's perfect. I made the right decision to do with the sleeves. I couldn't get any more of that color, but I think that what I did really worked. And he wears that thing all the time. It fits him beautifully. Both of my parents came to visit me and my boyfriend in Philly this past weekend, and we went to the Barnes Museum, and he was wearing his jumper that I made him, and I was wearing one of my handmade jumpers, and in like every gallery room people were stopping him and complimenting him on it, and he's like so excited, and he said, oh, my daughter made it for me, that's her, she also made that jumper. And it's just really fun. He says people stop him on the street when he wears it. It is quite the looker. It's gorgeous. It's very like noticeable, and it looks special, and it looks handmade. I can't speak to the shaping or the writing of the wave pullover design because I didn't use it. I really just used the motif. The Doppio sweater I found to be really well written, and I really like the sort of subtle curved raglan shaping in that. And I think if you want to combine patterns, you should do it. It's the best way to get exactly what you want, and there's no reason not to. I think it's a really great sort of test. It was a little bit challenging to figure out as I was increasing where the colorwork started and stopped, and there was a little bit of calculating when I first started so that I would make sure it was centered. And under the arms and sleeves was a bit of a challenge too, but not a challenge that I wasn't prepared or happy to undertake. And so yeah, it was really fun. It took quite a long time because it's a difficult yarn to work with, like to physically knit with. But holding the lace weight alpaca really helped. And I think that that also makes it quite a lot sturdier. People say that the unspun yarn makes a sturdier knitted garment than it does in yarn form. And it is sturdier, but I found that my garments that are well worn, that are unspun, are wearing much faster than my spun garments. Like, they have holes that I need to fix. So I think that the lace weight alpaca will hopefully help with that. And it definitely helped knitting it. So that was it. A wonderful jumper. I'm going to make a jumper for my other dad this year. I think he's quite he wears darker, sort of more muted clothes. So I think I'm going to like have a search around for some yarn and for a pattern like that I think would be really good for him, because I want to make him something that he'll wear and love. Nudity sweater, wonderful. Loved every second of it. I gave it to him about 3 weeks ago. It's so much fun to give something to someone that you've made and have them just love it. It's great. I have 2 more garments to show you. I finished them both within a week of each other, and it took me, I had quite a big knitting slump in the sort of autumn, early winter portion of this year. So I didn't finish anything in between August and December. But then at the end of December, I finished 2 things. So I'll show you the first thing, which is kind of what I credit to getting me out of my knitting slump. And partially I started working on it because it was a test knit and the deadline was coming up. So this is a test knit for the Knit Pearl girl, Sophie Hemmings, and it's the Stanford sweater. So here is it is a raglan pullover with a very deep button placket. So here it is on. I used whole super soft held double to knit this. I mostly did this because it was, I've got a piece of fluff. It was what I had in stash, and I didn't leave myself a huge amount of time to do this test knit. Sophie has a really generous test knitting time frame, so that was really useful for me. I never expected to have a knitting slump when I signed up because I've never had one before in my life. But for 2 months there, I just didn't want to knit a single thing. I knew that I really liked this yarn at this gauge because I had made the stick season jumper out of it the year before. And I'd made this swatch, so I didn't have to make another swatch, and I just cast on. The recommended needle size was 4mm, but I knew I would hit gauge with 4.5 after washing the spinning oil out of the garment. So that was what I did. I went ahead and I cast on a size that I think in retrospect has too much positive ease on me, but it's gonna be like a really comfy, nice jumper. And I did this organic striping look. I wanted it to look a bit like sort of when you see a rocky mountainside and it has all those compressed layers of earth. And I just used colors that I already had in my stash. It's top down. Most of it is worked flat because the button placard goes so low. And I know that as I wear this yarn, it tends to shrink up. So I made the sleeves kind of long and I made the body kind of long because I anticipate as I wear it, it's going to get wider and shorter. So right now it is longer than I want. It's not narrower than I want, but yeah, I know that it'll shrink up a little bit as I wash it and wear it. I've only washed this once, which was when I blocked it. So it's not really stood the test of time yet. I still have some ends to weave in. There are so many ends on this jumper because almost every stripe has 2 ends. Yeah, but it just, slowly I sit down and I spend 15 minutes weaving in a couple of ends. I've done all the ones on the body and all the ones on the button placard and all of the ones at the back on the raglan seam, which is where I was doing them during the short rows, and I just have the sleeves to do, which is about as many, if not more, than on the body. But I'm making my way through it. It's happening. It's got a double folded over collar, which isn't something that I love. It's a little bit of a preppy vibe, and that's not really my style. But something that happened when I blocked it was that the collar got much wider, because that's what this yarn does. And I think that it's actually like fine now. I was thinking about unraveling it after the test was over. I wanted to knit it as it was in the pattern for the test, but now I think I probably will unravel it. And I used these black plastic buttons. I just had them. I got a box of buttons from my grandmother with like every spare button she's gotten off of a garment for all of her adult life, which is a real treasure. And I just used 5. They're all different, but they look similar enough. And attached those. I did continue the stripes on the neck, the collar, but I didn't do them on the button band because I thought that the stripes going in different directions would be kind of like visually distracting. But I did continue the stripes like everywhere else on the ribbing on the body. And I think it came out really, really nicely. I don't love this base color. I bought it a long time ago. I think it was in 2020, which was sort of before I knew what I really liked. So this might get dyed in a way where you can still see all the stripes. I haven't really decided. I did make this swatch with all of the colors just in case I did decide to see if I wanted to dye it. I think like a sort of glaze of really any color, like a blue might be kind of cool, but I don't know. I haven't made any decisions, but it's a possibility. I wouldn't want it to ruin it, so I'll like measure my swatch and just make sure that it won't destroy the garment before I do it, if I do end up doing that. But yeah, the only snag was that I ran out of this slightly darker brown just at the cuff. So this second sleeve that I did doesn't have any of that at the cuff where the first one does. But I was able to use some ends, some of the longer ends that I had woven in and then cut to do a little 2-row stripe on my swatch, which was pretty good, pretty satisfying. So I finished this in time for the test knit to be done. I sent in all of the yardage amounts, and I've been wearing it a little bit. I only finished it like a week ago, so I haven't been wearing it longer than a week. And I really like it. I love the stripes. I think it's really fun. And yeah, it's interesting. I've done 2 test knits this year. And yeah, this one was really good. I like the WhatsApp group. Everyone was very nice. It was fun to see other people's patterns, other people's versions of the pattern as they made them. And it was fun to post mine and to see what people thought of different parts of it. So I did enjoy that. Oh, and Sophie has a really generous reward for finishing the test knit. She gives you a couple of free patterns by her. So that was great, and I'll probably make those into garments in the coming years. All right, it's time to show you my last garment and my last finished object of 2024. I finished this at 8:30 p.m. on the 31st of December. I had finished the knitting maybe a month, 6 weeks before, but I had to apply the zipper. So this is the Gia Zipper Genser by Sandus Garn Designs. And I used Hedgehog Fibers Tweedy held with Lang Yarns lace weight mohair in the silvery blue color. I purchased this Hedgehog Fibers Tweedy in the second drop, and I was so in love with the idea of Tweedy. It was before Corey Worsted came out from La Bien-Aimée. I'd never really seen anything like it. I thought it was gorgeous. Just like all of the speckles and the tweed and how it was using all of the colors in their other yarns. And I bought 7 skeins of it in 2020, and then I didn't know what to do with it until this year. So I sort of impulsively cast on this pattern. I don't know why. It's not a style that I would like, that I've ever really thought about making before, but I really like it. I'm glad that I bought the pattern, glad that I held onto the yarn, glad that this became this. But I don't really remember my thought process behind casting it on. It was a little bit impulsive. It's a drop shoulder pattern, and it's kind of similar in shape to the Stanford sweater, although it ends up laying quite differently. So in the case of this jumper, this placard is double knit here, and then you insert the zipper, and there's a zipper facing which you have to sew down. It took me 4 tries to get it right. I ended up doing a pretty good job. It's not perfect, but it's definitely good enough. And I don't really see myself wearing it more than like a little bit zipped up anyway. It's perfect for me. It's about waist length, high hip, mid hip length. I thought it was going to be too short, but then I blocked it. And with the zipper in, it's very nice. It's a very nice length. I also thought the sleeves were a bit short, but they're not. They're perfect, actually. They're very functional. Maybe they're like a hair shorter than ideally they would be, but I always roll my sleeves up anyway. And with these, I never roll my sleeves up because they're kind of bracelet length, I guess. I always heard other people say that, and I was like, I would want my sleeves to be full length. And then here I am, having accidentally knit bracelet length sleeves, and I'm loving it. It's a drop shoulder. Did I already say that? And yeah, the mohair is gorgeous. I really like the Lang lace weight mohair. It's a very thin, very soft mohair. It's thinner than most lace weight mohairs, and it's got quite a high silk content, which I really like. It's not scratchy at all. And I purchased this zipper on Etsy. The pattern said, I don't remember, but I ended up going 2 inches shorter than what the pattern said. That was part of what held me up. I kept trying to sew in this longer zipper and make it work, and it was just too long. The end of the double knitting is where you're supposed to have the end of the zipper, so the fabric isn't reinforced below where the zipper ends, so you don't really want to be sewing the zipper into this patch of single thickness fabric because you would really see it there. So my attempts at hiding the extra 2 inches were very visible and they looked bad. So I bought, unfortunately, zippers came in packs of 3. So I now have 5 zippers that I don't have a use for. Maybe I'll make like pouches or something. But once I got a shorter length, it took a couple of hours, but I managed to get it in, and I'm really, really happy with this. I think that it came out great. I love the yarn. I've worn it a lot this week. It's been quite cold, and I thought that this would be a little bit too much of a preppy style, but I think being able to have it open just really suits a lot of the things that I'm wearing and doing. I ended up going down a needle size to a 4mm needle instead of a 4.5 because, and I had met gauge with the original needle size, but I made a swatch with a 4mm needle and I just really liked the fabric of it. So I ended up going up, I think 2 or 3 sizes, and then knitting at a tighter gauge to give me this fabric at my size, which I guess is maybe why the sleeves are a little bit short, because the sleeves don't necessarily get much longer with every size. Maybe that's what happened there. that would make sense. But yeah, that's something I do fairly frequently, change size based on the gauge that I'm using. And I love the fabric. I was right to do that. It was a kind of fast knit. I started it when I had COVID over the summer, and I think the whole back panel, and I did like the whole yoke in a week, and then this double-faced button band area took me ages. I also omitted almost all of the decreasing in the body. You can see that there's some decreasing up to here, but even that is half of the rate recommended in the pattern, and then I just stopped decreasing halfway through the body. I really like the fit that I ended up getting. My striped Yanni pullover, on this, the body decreasing, you can see it's quite dramatic. I think you can see. And that's one stitch decreased, 4 points around the body every 4th row. And the original pattern for this jumper has you decrease every other row at 4 points. And I thought, like, twice the decrease rate of this is just too much. I think you probably have to be making one that was much more oversized than mine is for that decrease rate to not look odd. So I'm really happy with what I did. I think it came out perfect. I don't think I'll make another one of these. I don't think I want another zipper pullover like this, but I would maybe make one for someone else. It's very satisfying. And I love this yarn and mohair combo. Again, I don't think I would make another garment out of this just because, I have this one. But I would make a hat. I'd make something for someone else. I think I have 2 skeins of Tweety left over. I bought 7 skeins originally, DK weight skeins. And I have a good amount of the mohair left over too. So again, maybe matching hat. Maybe something like that. So I ended the year on a very, very positive note. It's been a very interesting year of knitting for me. I've definitely had some big misses, but I've also had some really big hits. I've learned a lot about what I like. I've really played around with shaping and figuring out what works best for me. I'm quite picky about the way I want garments to fit me if I'm making them with my own 2 hands, because I have the skill to make something that really fits. So why wouldn't I do that? So yeah, it's been like a very creative and fun knitting year, and I've got 4 finished object garments that I really love, and at least 2 of them I've been wearing a lot. So I think that the one that didn't turn out so great, I'll try and return to and see if I can fix that up. And if you're a viewer of my regular podcasts, you'll probably see me do that when it happens. Well, you'll definitely see me do it when it happens. Among a couple of other pieces that I want to go back and fix, but nothing else from this year really has any issues or things for me to fix, which is nice. I think I've generally been pretty committed to fixing things as I go and not giving up until it's done and done right. I feel really happy about all of the stuff I've made, and I hope that you've enjoyed seeing it. This video has been long so far, but I'm going to tell you about what I'm planning on making this year in 2025, and sort of talk you through my plans and my dreams and aspirations. So yeah. It's sort of a make 9, although there's more than 9 things, and it's not all patterns. Some of it is sort of conceptual. But I have 4 different categories of things that I'd like to make. The first one is just straightforward patterns that I want to make. And number 1, at the top, most important pattern that I want to make in 2025 is the Raven Capelet. by Alice Starmore. It's this like neck and upper body accessory, and it looks like feathers. It's so cool. That's the sort of thing I want to make always. It seems like a spiritual successor to me to my green ribbon scarf, because it's an accessory that keeps you warm but also kind of tells a story. This one's a little bit more costumey and a little bit more out there. I think it would be really fun. It's kind of a shame that the only way to get the pattern is if you buy a kit, but I'll do it. I think that Alice Starmore's yarn seems quite nice. I don't mind buying a kit. I will do that eventually. So that's my number one most prioritized pattern that I want to make in 2025. The second thing, sort of category of pattern, is I want to make another big Fair Isle garment in 2025. This vest that I've been wearing through this video, I think I made it in 2022. It's by Ella Gordon, and it's the Roosty Tank, and I made it using Jameson and Smith. I talked about this a lot when I was making it. I had a blast making it, and I wear it a lot. Like, I wear this thing all the time. I loved knitting it. I really want to make another Fair Isle garment. I haven't decided which one, and I don't know what color palette I want to do, but the whole process of choosing colors and making swatches and using Photoshop to sort of make a mock-up of the colors was really fun to me. So I'm really looking forward to doing that, and it's a little bit intimidating to get into, just because it's a lot of sort of upfront planning, but it's something I want to do, and that's really close. It's second, close to the top of my list for things that I want to make in 2025. The third thing that I want to make in 2025 in this category is using stash yarn. I have a lot of brightly colored, really fun superwash sock yarn. In fingering weight, I want to make the Saglin pattern by Albiona McLaughlin, which is a sort of contiguous combination of saddle shoulder and raglan, similar to my Yanni, but not so deep in the yoke, holding the yarn double and doing some really fun, really bright stripe combinations. So that's a stash project, and I think that I'll get a lot of wear out of it and really enjoy knitting it, because I really like knitting raglan-y sort of patterns, and I love working with color. That was part of what was so fun about working on this jumper, just like seeing all the colorful tweed. So, and I really liked on my Stanford sweater, like choosing where all the stripes were going. So I think that this will have the best of both worlds, being like from stash, choosing where the stripes are going, bright colors. So that is on the list. The fourth and final thing in this category is I've been really into Caffey Facet. I'm not sure if it's calf or Caffey. It's probably Caffey. He's a designer who designed a lot in like the 80s and 90s, and he does a lot of gorgeous intarsia color work patterns. I think he primarily designed for Rowan. I love Rowan yarn. I've worked with a lot of their yarn and I really like it. And I think he designed some of their colorways as well. But I just have been looking at his patterns for months now and loving them, and I really just am itching to cast on a big, complicated intarsia colorwork project. And I actually, this weekend, went to the library, the Free Library of Philadelphia, the big one, and I found they have a couple of his books, and I went through them and I took pictures of the patterns that I liked, so I'll pop some of them in here. And I'm not sure which ones I'm going to make, but I really want to try my hand at one of those. So that's the final one on my sort of specific patterns I'd like to make category. My second category is functional items that I would like to make so that I have. And there's only two things in this category, but I've been knitting for, I don't know, been knitting like a lot for about 8 years, so there's not a lot of things left that are like holes in my wardrobe. But there's two things that I would really like to do. The first one is some sort of mesh top made out of wool. I'm thinking the what's the James M. Watts mesh pattern. There's Look at My Holes, which is nice, which is a contender, and then there's also like a more meshy one. I want to make that. I think I would wear it a lot, and it would be really good for me because I run very warm, and I like to layer. I think that's kind of one of the ultimate layers because it gives you a little bit of extra warmth, but still lets a breeze come through. And I also think it looks really cool, good for under t-shirts, good for under dresses, that sort of thing. So that's one of the two. And the second thing of the two is I want to make one of those big felted slippers, a pair of them, where you knit, it's like this shape, and then you put one end inside the other end, and then you felt it. I would like to make that, and I would like, if it goes well, I'll make them for other people too. I've been wanting to do this for a while. I think I wear them a lot. I've never deliberately felted something, so that's quite exciting to me. And yeah, I'm very excited about the idea of that, and that's on my list for 2025. The third category is gifts. So the gifts that I would like to make for people in my life. The first one I've already mentioned. I'd like to make a jumper for my other dad who didn't receive a jumper this year. I love him. He's my parent, and I would like to make him a jumper that he'll love and wear and put the time into it. I think that this is going to require a good amount of planning and thought and maybe a bit more stealth than my last one used. And I have no idea. It'll probably be a dark color. I'm thinking of maybe using one of the nightshades, or maybe some very subtle, like a gray on gray, a navy on black sort of color work for it. But I'm not really sure. I'm thinking and I'm gathering information. His birthday's in November, so I've got most of the year. It's not a significant year, like it's not a round number, but I think I could probably finish it before November. So that's on. The third gift is I want to make a pair of socks for my dad's friend John. I know that you don't know John, and my parents don't watch my videos because I haven't told them that I have a YouTube channel. But do you ever meet a person who's just like so excited about your knitting and just like loves it and is like wants to talk about it and is really engaged? Well, that's John. He's such an artistic person. He really appreciates craftsmanship, and I want to make him a pair of socks. I bought yarn for it, but it got lost in the post or stolen off of my doorstep. I don't know which one. So I need to contact Yarnspirations, which is where I got the yarn from, and try and get a refund or try and get them to send it to me again. I'm going to make them out of Patton's Croy, and I'm going to use this sock pattern, which I put on the screen, which I don't remember the name of, because I've made this pair of socks and they're wonderful, and I use the same yarn for them. This will be quite easy, I think. 3.25 millimeter needles. It was the first pair of socks I ever made, and they're still one of the best pairs of socks I have. So I would like to make a version of those, or two, for John. And probably soon. That's one of the sooner projects I want to make, because I think that it'll be really doable. Okay, the third person I want to make a gift for is my friend Bailey. She does know that I have a YouTube channel because I accidentally sent her a thumbnail when I meant to send it to my boyfriend. So I don't think she watches the videos though. She's just a really good friend, and I would like to make her something. and she doesn't wear jumpers. I asked her to send me measurements of an existing jumper that she already has, and she said she doesn't own any because she doesn't wear them. So I don't want to make her a jumper if she's not going to wear it, or if she's going to wear it and not like it. But there's a lot of other things, like maybe a nice cowl, maybe a hood, maybe a pair of mittens. Not sure what, but I'd like to make her something. So that's more vague, but gift for my friend. I met her on my master's degree, and she's wonderful, and I'd like to knit her something. Okay, the last thing in my gifts category is more Cuddly Toys. Hazel the squirrel was such a success. I've got this whole book, and so many people said that they wanted one or hinted at it, and I'd like to make one for my boyfriend's brother's daughter in a more baby-friendly yarn. They're just so cute. It came out so well. I had such a good time making it, and I'd like to make more of them this year because it really brought me a lot of joy. And I see no reason not to make more. I wonder if I could like engineer the patterns to be a bit simpler and smaller and maybe make them as like Christmas tree ornaments. That would be really nice. But so many lovely people have given me very nice compliments on Hazel the squirrel, and I want to make a version of her for all of them, but I couldn't because that would take me too long. So, but maybe just a couple of them I can make Cuddly Toys for. Okay, those are all the gifts I'd like to make. That's 4. I think that's doable. This year I made 2 gifts, but I think 4 is within reach. The last category of planning for this coming year is stash that I would like to use up. Now, I have some yarn here, I have some yarn in Edinburgh, and I have enough yarn that I'm not really looking to buy anymore, but I don't have like a crazy amount. I'm not on a no-buy. I was a little bit out of control with yarn purchasing in 2020 and 2021, but in the past couple of years I've really sort of sorted out my issues to do with that. I have a couple spreadsheets that I have where I where I have written down like how much yarn I use versus how much yarn I buy, both in meters and grams. And that's very good information just to keep yourself aware of how long it actually takes to use up a skein of yarn. Currently in my stash here, I have 4 sweater quantities. One of them is in the form of these. I have 2 of these cones of whole super soft, which I made this jumper out of. So I'm not really feeling the pressure to use this up because I've already just made a garment out of it. In fact, I'm considering giving this away or selling it because I've gotten good use out of it, but I probably don't need almost 2 cones more. So aside from that, I have 3 sweaters quantities. 2 of them are from Whistlebear, and they are gifts that were from my dad. I'm going to grab the yarn that I'm talking about so that I can show you. Here's the first, one skein from the first one. It's DK Evering Bell from Whistlebear. Evering Bell is 80% mohair, 20% Wensleydale, and it's quite a thin DK, but it is fluffy because of the mohair content. It's beautiful. It's a beautiful yarn. I got it as a birthday present the year before this year. So I've had it for about 1.5 years, and yeah, it's really, really pretty. I was planning on making a V-neck pullover with a sailor collar, kind of similar to this, but I guess like lower, and it would go back. And I liked the juxtaposition of the sort of more masculine old-timey sailor collar in this like very sweet feminine pink, and I still like that idea. So I might end up doing that, but you never know until you cast on. Yeah, so this is one of the sweater quantities that I have. The other sweater quantity is actually the same yarn, but in a 4-ply weight, so in a fingering weight, although they feel quite different. But I suspect that that's the sort of thing that it will all becomes even in the wash. So this is in the color Flawed-In. It's this beautiful sage color. Again, the 4-ply, I'm not sure if I'll hold it double or if I will hold it single. I have enough yarn to do either, and I would definitely keep everything open. I don't know. I'll just make whatever feels right at the time. So yeah, this is my 3 out of 4 sweater quantities. My last sweater quantity is really special. It was a gift from my friend Bailey, who I mentioned earlier in the video as someone that I want to make a gift for. She grew up on a farm, and her parents, I think, still are farmers. I'm not totally sure. But they're really lovely. And last winter, she sent me this box full of gorgeous farm yarn from her farm. And they sent it to the spinning mill locally and had it spun. And then she sent it to me with no warning. And it's the most beautiful wool. So there's 3 different colors, and they're all slightly different weights. So I probably wouldn't use them all together. But there's this really beautiful, like alive, puffy white yarn. And I have like, it came in hanks, which I wound up, and there are quite a few breaks in the hanks. So that's why some of them are in smaller balls. But that, I mean, it'll spit slice together really easily when I'm making it. I also have this gorgeous black, natural black. And then this sort of off-white cream, you can see it next to the white, is from their llama, who died like during that year. So yeah, I have written down the meterage and the weight, and I calculated sort of roughly what sort of gauge I would knit each of them at. I think I would probably hold, the white one is almost double the thickness of the other 2, so I would probably hold the other 2 double if I were to knit them together. I don't think I have enough of any of them individually to make a whole garment out of just one of the colors, but I really like the idea of using them together, and I was thinking of doing some sort of all-over color work design. Think like something along the lines of the Partner Pullover by Lydia Morrow, or something else. Like I've made myself a colorwork swatch that I really like the look of, that I'll put in here. Or there's also the Anjou pullover that was in Pom Pom last year, and there's also the Fortuna's Wheel pullover. So you get an idea of the sort of thing that I'm thinking of. And yeah, I would love to make that this year. So I have these 4 sweaters quantities. One of them is the hulse, which I'm not really worried about. I definitely have like enough yarn in my stash to make other sweaters, many, but these are the only 4 where I have the amount that I would need to make a whole garment out of one yarn, that I sort of purchased deliberately to be a sweater. So I'd love to knit up 2 of these, 2 out of the 4 this coming year. I think that would be wonderful. I guess I didn't get any of them in 2024. I got this at the very end of 2023, and 3 out of the 4 were gifts. So I have really knit through all of the sweater quantities that I've purchased, and yeah, it's gone well. So I'd like to keep doing that. And I'm hopeful that I'll make all of these goals. It's not really a knit 9, although make 9, although I love looking at those, and maybe I'll like fashion a version of that. But within these 4 categories, I'm very excited about what's to come for 2025 knitting. And I'm happy about what I did in 2024. So I hope that you've enjoyed this extremely long video. My voice is a bit hoarse now, and the sun has set. It set like an hour ago. So maybe you watch this in parts. Thank you so much for watching. I hope that you have a good year, I guess. And yeah, I'll see you in my next podcast. Bye.